Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another poetry discussion. This is, of course, part of the poetry discussion playlist on the channel, but it is in celebration of National Poetry Month 2023, which is 30 poetry discussions in 30 days here on the channel. If you want to help me out with what I'm doing here on the channel, hitting that like button tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers, lovers of poetry, lovers of short stories, lovers of novels. That is what I do here on this channel. Just literature. So if you're here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button in order to stick around for more. But National Poetry Month 2023 has Sundays with Sylvia Plath poems on Sundays, William Blake on Mondays, Edgar Allan Poe on Tuesdays, Wednesdays with William Shakespeare and his sonnets on Wednesday. Last week, Sonnet 1, I had a good time doing that, despite the fact that William Shakespeare beats me up like few other writers. Emily Dickinson on Thursdays. I am going to get around to doing Dickinson Darkly, which will be my poem by poem read through of Emily Dickinson in general, but this month is kicking my butt on a lot of levels. Frost Friday, we're reading through New Hampshire, the poetry collection from William Frost on Fridays. Yesterday was Place for a Third. We are several poems into that. We've been working on New Hampshire for 3 years now, so we ought to be. And here we are with Bukowski, Slumming Saturdays with Bukowski, a poem called Be Kind. The poem reads as such. We are always asked to understand the other person's viewpoint, no matter how outdated, foolish, or obnoxious. One is asked to view their total error, their life waste, with kindliness, especially if they are aged. But age is the total of our doing. They have aged badly because they have lived out of focus. They have refused to see, not their fault. Whose fault? Mine? I am asked to hide my viewpoint from them for fear of their fear. Age is no crime, but the shame of a deliberately wasted life among so many deliberately wasted lives is. Now, I try not to put too many personal stories on the channel, but I think that when they work into the sort of ambiance of the poem, maybe they are necessary in order to find my mental space for this. And I hope to be able to communicate things well. Accurately, sure, but accuracy is not necessarily the point of a personal story. In fact, that's where fiction comes from, right? Not very long ago, I worked with a woman who was mid 60s, and the position in which she worked was not particularly prestigious, right? I mean, um, probably something closer to minimum wage than not. And she was not the most capable individual. Um, and it was one of those situations where here she is. I mean, so anytime I think that you see something like that in your life, something like that, someone like that pops up, the initial thing to do is to cut and paste yourself into their position. This is a woman who was struggling, right? Struggling into her mid 60s and couldn't figure out sometimes how to get to work, couldn't figure out how to be on time almost ever, couldn't figure out, how to come back from her breaks on time, couldn't figure out how to do many of the myriad things which we are expected to do at work. And it was terrifying because probably at no point in that woman's life was someone willing to just say to her, And maybe she just wasn't capable. All of us have differing levels of skills, all of us have differing levels of abilities, learning abilities, things like that. But I felt so bad for her because it was almost as if no one had ever taken her aside and said, "Hey, like, you gotta shape up. You have to shape up because the world is cruel. It's a cruel, cruel world. We have responsibilities for ourselves." And I think anytime you see a situation like that, for me, where I work in an area where there's a lot of homeless people as well. I always cut and paste myself. And cutting and pasting myself into I think it's a thought experiment that you owe yourself to do anytime you see anyone in a different circumstance, different enough that it is obvious within a moment's glance. Maybe that's someone being homeless and all of the misfortune that comes with that. Maybe you're walking down the street and you happen to see Jeff Bezos. It's more fun to imagine yourself as that guy, but asking yourselves the ethical dilemma questions of any scenario in order that you may be ready for them if they ever fall upon you. And cutting and pasting myself into the lives of these homeless people was almost easier than cutting and pasting myself into this woman's life because you're homeless. You understand that the burdens are going to be physical. You understand that if you can find some place to sleep, if you can find something to eat, you can find some way to stay warm, you're going to be okay. When you add in to that all of these questions of rent, these questions of getting your oil changed, these questions of getting your license renewed, who wants to do that? All of these different questions of the monotony of society, the things that we have to do. We have to file our taxes every year. We have to do this. We have to do that. And when I cut and paste myself into these homeless people's lives, for some reason, whenever I do that, I cut and paste myself with my intelligence, with my physical strengths, with all of those things. But when I cut and pasted myself into her life, it was asking myself the questions, what if? What if I wasn't quite as industrious and I didn't know that it was required? What if I was not as literate and I didn't know that that might be important? Um, One of the other things that is a positive for me in my life as it stands, the power to communicate will make you better off in every situation. Language is power. If you are of any job set, doing anything, being able to speak your way through the situation is easier for you. And when I was working with this woman, I didn't even have the heart, I I always try to manage people how they need to be managed. Some people need the tough love approach. Some people need the buddy buddy guy. Some people need space and directive to operate. Some people need all sorts of things. And you sort of play them out at the beginning of your work relationship with them. I don't know what it was. I don't know what would have woken her up, would have taken her by the shoulders and shaken her a little bit and said, "Hey, this is necessary." So when you are of those skill sets and you get yourself in trouble and you don't have the language ability to communicate yourself out of trouble, trouble becomes terminal. Trouble becomes final. And that's, a lot of what I think this poem is really going into here. One is asked to view their total error, their life waste with kindliness. And I hesitate to say that, anyone has wasted their life, but I think it's always a good I think it's a good practice. It's eye-opening, terrifying at times, but I think it's a good practice to ask yourself those moments after you open your eyes in the morning, still in bed, ask yourself, if you woke up today first conscious in your life, how would you feel about it? If you, like a movie, woke up this morning and found yourself as yourself, how would you feel? Um, Steve Jobs famously, at a commencement speech, said, I ask myself every day, if this were the last day of my life, am I spending it how I would want to be spending it? And if for too many days in a row the answer is no, I have to change something. Well, that's a scary prospect too, because what do you change? When do you change it? And how are you sure that that change is for the positive, right? Some things in life just take a long time of putting your nose to the grindstone and never looking up. But what if? What if you do? What if you put your nose to that grindstone and you scrape along for years and years at a time, and you look up and you've made 6 inches of progress? You know, at what point do you talk to yourself about what it is that you should not be doing, about what it is that you should be doing, about what it is that you have to start doing differently? Here's where Bukowski addresses it. They have aged badly because they have lived out of focus. They have refused to see. What is focus? Certainly, Bukowski was not a CEO. Certainly, Bukowski was successful in his own right. Certainly, Bukowski died in 1993, so 30 years ago, and here I am, some schmuck on the internet talking about him. Here you are, watching a video about one of his poems. That is success of a sort. What is the focus of your life? Is that what makes that trudging along so slow and arduous when you have your nose to the grindstone and you only inch by inch along for years at a time? I don't know. Maybe. What type of progress is it that you want to see in your life? How hard are you willing to work in order to see that progress? I think that there is a lot of credulity in our world. I think that there is a lot of taking things for granted in our world. And every once in a while, the big idea shifts. Every once in a while. Well, we don't need as many accountants now because we have all of this software on computers. Well, we don't need as many XYZ because we have all of this AI going on. Well, we don't need as many horses because we have this here internal combustion engine. Every once in a while, those big ideas shift. Where do we have to be in life for those things not to ruin us? Because every once in a while, the big ideas shift. But all the time, The little ones are roiling over. The little ones are boiling at a low roll. And it's those little ideas, the tumult from them tossing us back and forth, that I think causes us to lose that focus and to lose what our idea of a good life might be. As for myself, I'm not sure. I wake up and I work. It's what I do. But I'm not particularly all the time sure on what. I'm not particularly all the time sure of the efficacy, you know? I mean, every once in a while, I look up and I've made more progress than I thought, but a lot of times I haven't, you know? And how much is that worth? The progress. That's all I have for this poetry discussion. Be Kind by Charles Bukowski, one of his more well-known poems. If you want to help me out with what I'm doing here on the channel, hitting the like button tells YouTube to share this video with other poetry lovers, other literature lovers, other short story lovers, novel lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, consider hitting the subscribe button. Stick around for more. This is all I do on this channel, is literature. Sometimes writing, but just the written word. That's all I'm doing here. So hopefully building a library that is worth keeping up with. Tomorrow, we will have a poem from Sylvia Plath for the first time this month, as last Sunday was the 150th poetry discussion in the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel. And I hope to have you back for that one.